In a world where space and time are intertwined, one man dared to challenge the status quo. His name? Dayton Miller. His weapon of choice? A flute. But not just any flute. This instrument held the power to unleash the ether, a pervasive medium once thought to fill the universe. Miller, a physicist by trade, a musician at heart, discovered a harmonic resonance within the ether. He found that his flute, when played with precision, could manipulate this elusive medium. His melodies, a symphony of science, had the potential to shift the very fabric of reality. However, a sinister force lurked in the shadows. The Einsteinian demons.
All right. All right. Hello and welcome to Aether Roundtable 113. Tonight's going to be a yearly recap episode. But before we get into the recaps and all of that, we embarked on our first merch run this year, and it was very successful, and we were able to get a C star and participate in the celestial theodolite measurements, which ends up being the kind of the central theme of this year. Looking back on all the work that we've done, because I was just doing the recap for the Globebuster season as well, but looking back on all of the prezzies that were done and everything that's been done in terms of the celestial theodolite with the spreadsheet work and whatnot, and bringing the argumentation to the Globe lads, seeing what they have to offer, and then going from there, and just the continual refinement of it has led to an amalgamation of knowledge that has coincided with the other presentations that were put forward throughout the year, mostly regarding the two-sphere model, the spherical coordinate system, the graticule that Shane often talks about, really pioneering the deconstruction of the backbone of the globe, showing that these conceptual models here are what define the positions of the stars relative to a fictitious observer at a specific time following an assumed linear angular descent rate that appears to not be followed in reality, and that's what the cell-theo measurements show. So what we're looking at here is a recording of an occlusion that occurred. It's 39 Aquarii, and there's the moon there, and that star is setting into the mountain peak, and it immediately gets occluded. Now, when we reference the positions within the internally consistent coordinate system of the graticule, which is latitude and longitude, which is defined by positions of where the stars once were on a specific night and time, and moving forward from that at a fixed 15 degrees per hour, this entire coordinate system is constructed, which relates a position of a star to a position on the ground at any time of day. So long as you know what your local time is, you'll know where the star is with reference to that 15 degree per hour coordinate system. But what these measurements end up showing is that there is an offset from the observer's perspective on the time of occlusion and the reference point of where they say the star is at in their coordinate system. And what that means is that the star isn't truly angularly descending at 15 degrees per hour, which is the reference position for that would be the true position of the star, which is the reference point for this coordinate system to work. Yeah.
YouTube is only seeing the opening screen.
YouTube's only seeing the opening screen. Okay, 1 second. Thank you. I'll fix it. Sorry about that, YouTube. I'll do a quick recap. You guys haven't missed much. I was just showing the celestial sphere model here. Celestial sphere on the left, terrestrial sphere on the right. When you merge these two together, they relate positions of stars to positions on the ground with respect to time. And then over here, I was showing the C-star footage from Mike's 39 Aquarii occlusion, where the star sets into the mountain so that we can all kind of see what this spreadsheet is describing. I spend so much time in this thing, I forget that it's supposed to be representing this, and a lot of people who haven't seen this part of it yet have no idea how to relate this to what was recorded. So just to give a little recap there, this is the star setting into the mountain. And anyway, the globe makes a the following this terrestrial and celestial sphere model makes a specific prediction on that. And using this methodology of occlusions and checking the true position reference for that geometric intersection point for there to be an occlusion, we find that the conceptual model that they're using isn't true in reality. The stars are, parallel to the ground, and their angular descent is a feature of optics as they move away from us. And the fact that they linger at the horizon and don't truly get, don't continuously get lower like predicted by the globe is that's how it would work on a flat earth, because the stars are just moving away from you. So their true position to you can be higher as it's moving away because it's not truly descending, but the position that you do see will be optically lower because it's setting into the horizon. It's on that curve of your vision, right? It's going down that arc to the horizon. So that's where it's going to linger the most when it's moving away from you, and not actually setting beneath your feet. So that was a hugely significant thing that came out of early January, actually, this year. And right off of the back of the TFE thing. And here we are a year later with one of the most advanced arguments and deconstructions of the globe model to date. Um, like just the observation of where the sun is for a single observer doesn't uh, it doesn't hold the same significance as it once did when we thought that the stars were actually following their true position descent. Like just this difference alone means that even their related calculated ground position is only relevant to the internal consistency of this coordinate system. So, which isn't represented by reality, because if it did account for the proper angular descent rate, then the stars would have set at a slightly later time using their coordinate system, and it would have been closer to the actual peak in their timing. But it was still a little. It was lower relative to where they predicted it on their 15 degree per hour descent. It was actually lower relative to the observer, but still higher, but still much higher than what they predict for the 206. So they predicted it's at 206 for the observer, but in reality, it got occluded at 231 for the observer. In their coordinate system, it would be 233 because it's following the exact 15 degree per hour. But yeah, that's extremely significant there because it shows that relationship of the true position, which defines the the geographic position for them to have on their coordinate system to make the Earth a globe, has no actual physical meaning. So it's just a calculated position. If you were, like, in other words, if you were to be at the zenith of this star at this time, it wouldn't be transiting over your head at this time of occlusion. It would be off, which means it's not following the 15 degree per hour relationship. Okay, and that's so anyway, there was multiple series on this this whole system here and how they back it up with terrestrial measurements, how they fit a datum into the coordinate system, how it's all tied together, how you could take a flat Earth measurement and put it into this datum, and then it's associated with these models with either the ellipsoid or the gravitational potential model, and by association of that, it literally wraps it onto a sphere. So that's why all of these measurements come out, and then when they're dissected into a reference datum, it's like a little slice of the globe coordinate system itself. So no matter what measurements come out of it, it's going to be globe. And then Stone did some awesome shadow work showing that the sun is setting when it's angularly visible by 70% of its actual angular size. So like it's setting when it's at 0.34 degrees in angular size. It's too big for a globe, because they predict one, they don't even predict that this triangle should exist, for one, because the globe is rotating at a constant rate to produce the shadows. So there's going to be a cutoff point where this isn't even possible, because the big shadow from the Earth curve is going to overtake the shadow that's being cast on your wall that you're trying to measure a difference to. And on the globe, that shadow would never stop increasing, like in altitude, over the thing that's casting it until the globe shadow just swoops over. So the fact that this exists at all, is evidence that the Earth is flat. And anyway, 70% of the sun is visible when this stops going, when the shadow stops increasing in altitude. So hugely significant, because their whole model, again, is based on that 15 degree per hour relationship. And anytime the sun is still visible longer than what they geometrically predict, they say that it's being refracted over Earth curvature. But what we learned from the celestial theodolite and other optic principles is that once something is geometrically occluded, there's no refracting it up to get it to lift it up. It's not a thing. So really solidifying our position that the sun just moves away from you, out of your field of view, and it takes its light with it. So Stone did an awesome breakdown of that, and you can see all the math and diagrams and plots that he made for the shadow ascent rate and all that. And it does not comport with what the globe predicts at all. And we opened up with the Cell-Theo and coordinate system merger here, but links to the spreadsheet are in here if anyone wants to ever reference them. And I'll put a link to this in the chat. But yeah, celestial navigation, coordinate systems, positions of the stars, even their dynamics of how they say, how they relate all that motion in the sky to a dynamic cause of mass attracting mass. Again, Stone did another breakdown, plugging in their figures, showing that there's no possible way that this would work out. The moon would spiral out; it would be cast out of its orbit. Made a nice free body diagram, doing a vector sum of all the magnitude of all the gravitational potential forces involved with respect to Earth Moon, and Sun Earth. None of them comport to what heliocentrism is based on. And it's based on Newtonian mechanics as applied to the sky, as told to us by Newton, who said that the observations of the moon are what supported his theory for testing. So his GMMR squared equation, that's supposed to describe the gravitational potential and mass attracting mass relationship between with the distance between two bodies that falls off with distance squared. Turns out to not even be true at all. It's not feasible. This doesn't result in the circular orbit that we see. It's mathematically impossible. And then we learned about the Chinese history, who were geocentric flat earthers, who would just take bearings to stars and then from the previous way of navigating, and then they turned that into the celestial sphere, and then they invented clocks and all that, and just went to the south on an expedition, measured the star's canopus at an 88 degree zenith, and then used that reference when they moved away from it to reproduce the same distance drop relationship that Polaris has in the north. And as soon as they had their enough distance away from it, an angle drop relationship, they could just calculate the rest out for symmetry, and they mapped out the entire south based off of that, and then using the two stars that lead the Southern Cross as references for a South Pole. So they never actually, went there. They just used a reference for it, and then using one star's zenith position and calculating out the 15 degree per hour relationship, they established the backbone of what was later turned into the globe from the Jesuits. At least that's what my conclusion of the situation was, because the Chinese invented the exact identical system that the Jesuits would later repropose to them as a more accurate system, but it was the same system. So it's impossible to sell someone their own car that they already own. So I don't think that the Jesuits' take on what they're presenting is accurate to what the Chinese official history is, and supported by various manuscripts and actual documents from the Chinese themselves, unlike the Greek references that we get, where all the references from the primary Greek don't exist, but we have references of a guy who worked with a guy who knew a guy who was at the Library of Alexandria when that guy, when the So like none of those, they're all like third and fourth hand stories or whatever. But the Chinese have primary source documents for all their trigonometry, all their water clock stuff, their history of progression of building the armillary spheres and whatnot. So I'm just pretty sure that it wasn't as told to us by the Jezzies with the 1600 timeline. And then of course there was the revisitation of the Felix Baumgartner jump, and that's a classic one because the ball should be rotating out from underneath the balloon as it ascends, and then also the descent time for when he jumps out, totaling for 158 minutes of rise, and then they should be 6 miles to the west, and it ended up being 43 miles to the east. And then the jet streams blowing in that direction or whatever were actually fast enough to make that prediction. So, or to make that be the cause. And on a globe, there would at least have to be, it wouldn't be the exact amount of that time either, based off of the velocity addition that they would be getting from the jet streams. So just complete geometric failure for their rotation being the cause of the sky motion. And then there was the backbone of cosmology of being Redshift being completely destroyed by Halton Arp observing redshifts of quasars that don't match their the galaxies that they're next to. And then also being when you look at the images from a different spectrum, you can see that the quasars and galaxies are connected by different filaments, and it also appears that there being that there was like an ejection from the galaxy. Now you can like plot that out on a graph, whether or not that's what actually happened or not, who knows. But you could draw a relationship like that on a graph, and it looks rather convincing. If one were to tell a story, them being ejected from the galaxy would optically make more sense than, no, it just looks like it's next to it, but it's really billions and billions of light years of distance between them. But because it's so big, because whatever it is so big and bright, it just happens to shine through that brightly, even though it's much further than the galaxy. They're actually not physically connected. Like, that's the main story that they tell us. But if you get a graph and draw a line, you could also tell another story. And so that's what ARP was heavily punished for, because mainstream cosmology is based on a one-to-one relationship to distance and velocity for their redshift interpretation when they look at the Doppler frequency of stars and galaxies and whatnot. So anyway, completely exposed how fraudulent and fragile their model is, and how it's dependent upon everyone agreeing on the same thing, a cosmological principle, if you will. And then it was pointed out by this gentleman, YP Varnishi, in the 70s that there's 57 quasars that are observable in the sky, and from our position on Earth, there's no other position that you could observe reference frame wise that would see all 57 of those galaxies. You would only see like 53 or 49 or whatever from different locations. So like if you were in Andromeda or Jupiter or Mars or the sun, you wouldn't see them all. And he gives some possible explanations for it, and then ultimately concludes that there is no explanation for it, and that they would have to abandon the cosmological principle, special and general relativity, and come up with a new cosmology. And at the end, he says maybe we should just reinterpret Hubble's interpretation of redshift to save all of our to save everything, because if you throw out those things, then none of their math, it's revealed that none of their math actually has any physical meaning. So lots of presentations on optical phenomenon creating the horizon, and how optical effects are what the globe is based off of. Every observation, every time you look at the sky or look across the horizon, it's somehow measuring the globe. Well, how'd they do that? Well, they just turned every observation into the globe radius, and then said any deviation from that is due to an effective radius, which is their refraction coefficient model. And so with enough refraction, you can explain any observation, whether or not that amount of refraction actually existed at that location to create the effects as prescribed by them. And I've even found instances where their effective model radius was falsified. If you look at the Novaya Zemlya effect, that was when the sun was seen at the 72nd latitude in the northern hemi, 2 weeks before it was geometrically supposed to be above the globe curve relative to those observers to even see it. And they saw it at 4.9 degrees above the horizon when it was supposed to be 4.9 degrees below it. So the Novaya Zemlya effect is whenever the amount of refraction is needed to explain how it's visible, that amount of refraction is due to some sort of ducting that starts with violating the unity value of their refraction coefficient. So the refraction values are always like 0.134, what have you. Always like, and you can increase those values, but you could never get to one. If you go to one or over one, that's over unity. That breaks it. That basically means that like it destroys the continuity of the effective radius of what they're doing. So you never want to go over unity. And anyway, the Novaya Zemlya effect requires them to start with going over unity, and then from that starting point, there's a ducting uh, gradient that goes over the entire distance to the observer. That just somehow works out mathematically to explain it. But they literally start with violating the mathematical principles of the effective radius itself, and then just so there's no way to optically ever, you're never going to see something too far. Like seeing too far is a personal choice, and but it's explained all by refraction and just regular optical effects. We see things converging, and at the rate of that, when they get closer to the horizon and further away from us, that rate increases non-linearly. It's pretty straightforward stuff. But if you're a globe lad, it has to be a specific way, and it can't be argued any other way, because any other way would leaves room for there not to be a globe. So anyway, Paul did an awesome job breaking all that down. And then we have the history of wave invariance, where they discovered the speed of light. They discovered all these great things and how to use light to tell how fast something's moving. They use light to um, basically tell how fast something's moving. That was a big part of early physics. When they got a real good handle on that, they started trying to measure the velocity of Earth through space, and none of it comported with what the value should have been for their cosmological model, which was heliocentrism. Based on Copernican's ratios and Newtonian dynamics, which are derivable from Newton's equations and vice versa. So, they had this whole thing that they were going to get these values when they took these measurements. So they ended up never getting those measurements. So they threw out the medium with respect to, or which was what the motion was supposed to be with respect to, instead of accepting the fact that the Earth isn't in motion, because that's a perfectly valid hypothesis. But they didn't throw that out. They kept it in motion, redefined physics, used the same equations that they were using that were derived under the principles of an elastic medium, and then just said that there was no medium, and that it's reality and time itself that changes, and that the wave velocity is constant, which is, crazy. But that's what they had to do to keep their cosmology alive in the face of all this ether advancements in the early 1800s to 1900s, where they were really popping off on uh, measuring velocity with light. Um, so yeah, we covered all the experiments: Airy's failure, Arago, Fresnel, the transverse Fresnel drag, which is crazy, because relativity would, if it were true, would predict that there's a fringe that the fringe pattern has an increase in the direction of motion rather than always in the same direction, irrespective of the motion. And that's a huge falsification of their paradigm, and it just goes completely unnoticed and unchallenged, because if the Earth isn't in motion, then everything they've been asserting is wrong, and they could never take it back now at this point. So anyway, the more we learn about history and current tech and the use of current technology, we find that they're always referencing a stationary, non-rotating Earth, and that all dynamic predictions begin with a stationary, non-rotating Earth. And you actually can't satisfy the laws of physics unless you're using a stationary, non-rotating Earth. And the laws of physics, of course, being conservation laws, energy and momentum predictions. Think the literal backbone stuff, all the classic Newton stuff. All of that requires a stationary, non-rotating lab frame to be with respect to. Um, so they had to redefine all of that to try and make their worldview consistent with the Earth that's appears stationary, measures pretty much stationary, with respect to their cosmological belief anyway. And they're like, well, it's so stationary because it's moving. That's how you know it's moving. So, and then they just backed all that up with math. And then we did more on terrestrial refraction there, and then specifically like occlusions and shadow casting. And we see these nice crisp outline shadows here. These types of shadows are only cast, would only be possible if the object occluding them was in your geometric line of sight. If you were looking at a diffused refracted shadow, none of this would look like this. You wouldn't get this quality, this sharpness, these defined features. Um, so yeah, that was huge, going over the principles of that, and like things like Mount Canigou, where the mountain is geometrically below the horizon, but we get this refracted image as if it's straight up, directly horizontal to the observer, and not leaned away. Like, it doesn't make any any sense the way that they have to try and explain it, how an observer sees it without it being geometric line of sight. Whereas on a flat Earth, it's just geometric line of sight. So Bambi did an awesome job breaking that down. Shane did a great prezi on the distance to the sun, like the physical distances that they that are required to be independently verified for their conceptual model to be true, to relate anything to the astronomical unit, which is the backbone of their coordinate system, to lay out everything to make it digestible and relative to that. And we found this paper that states that none of their cosmological constants that are used in astronomy, speed of light, Earth's shape, rotation, orientation, mass, everything, none of those are independently verified, and they're all ratios of one another. And physics, ideally, the backbone of physics, if you're going to use constants, those constants should be independently verified from one another. They should not all be ratios of the same thing. If they are all ratios of the same thing, then that creates an internally consistent system, but it doesn't mean that it represents reality. So that's a huge point there. And then, of course, the measurements themselves, are very scrupulous. They were basically measuring noise. They don't include any y-axis to give us a magnitude of the difference of what they were considering noise versus what they considered an actual measurement, even over the time intervals where they say that this just happens to be where it lined up and it's over the peak. Well, like, by how much? How much was it over the noise? We have no idea. None of the papers that assert that they measured these distances using ranging from radio frequencies include such documentation on them. Not a single one, which should tell you everything you need to know about the what this game is here. So that was an awesome breakdown, because if these measurements existed physically as they were told to us, that would give good agreement to their conceptual model. Like, that would be like, hey, you're on the right track at least. Yeah. And then Stone had the Dr. Shiva debacle, where he was proposing the ILS experiment, and the Globe lads weren't trying to have any of that. But basically, the principles of it were that using the landing radar from commercial planes, you could tell the altitude and distance of a plane on its descent angle, and using the glide scope on the plane, you have all the necessary information to reference its altitude, speed, descent angle, and time, and all that. So by having a pilot give him some measurements, he already had some data to show that the plane is at a lower altitude, meaning that there's no drop over distance between the runway and the plane. Because if the Earth were a globe, the Earth, that the Earth would be lower at that location, so there would be a difference in altitude, and none of that is present in the measurements. They all actually were on the flat Earth side. Oops, I didn't include the graphs from it, but definitely check out Stone's presentation on it. This is a fantastic proof because this radar ranging system creates a three-dimensional grid essentially where we know exactly where this plane is at in three-dimensional space relative to their coordinate system, and we know their exact altitude relative to that too, because this instrument isn't connected to this, and these things can't lie to one another because they're gonna work together to land a plane. So, so yeah, that was an awesome prezi from Stone there. And then Shane again with the gravimetry, showing us how they utilize those datums by wrapping just raw measurements at different latitudes to the datums to make it fit the model, and then what these measurements actually look like, and the depth of uh, change between them. It's like 100th of a gal, which is like, or 100,000th of a gal, sorry. Like the fluctuation between gravitational potentials that's measured here is nothing that would ever affect anything ever. And it doesn't even comport with the deflection of the vertical model that they say is causing gravitational offsets at their location, where they have to where it would be considered that they're tilting their zenith measurement or zenith mount so that they could be aligned with the star because their plug bob is lying to them. And it's like, that's crazy. And then when we got Neil deGrasse Tyson, saying that he used to think that the gravitational potential was latitude dependent. So, like, in other words, mass, like how much something weighs, would change latitude dependent wise. And then that's wrong. Like, it's not a thing. And so Neil was like, hey, you know what? I was actually wrong about that. And here's how we explain it through calculus. And anyway, if you do a bunch of integrals or integrations or whatever you do with calculus, if they use the Earth's rotation relative to the latitude to cancel out the weight and the gravitational fluctuation per latitude. So that's pretty cool that they were able to calculus that one out. And then Vanby came back again with geometric occlusions and refraction scenarios, where he was presenting on the difference between something being occluded optically versus physically, and how that relates to refract, like actual refraction's ability to present lift a virtual image up so you can see it, and what conditions are all required to make that happen. So that was an awesome prezi here, showing how when butane is added to the tank here, we can see the red Plato, but the red Plato is geometrically over this. So the light rays are all, even if there was no observer here, and we were above this tank, the light rays from all this would be scattered in all directions. So you wouldn't have any issue seeing it. They're already there. So when you lower the observer relative to this in this center obstacle here, if you change the medium, which will give a new boundary layer for the scattered light rays to project on, well, then you're going to be able to see that image, and that's what he showed there. And he was able to reproduce this effect, and then he was able to show that when the object is lower than what is occluding it, it's not possible to add any refraction to it to lift it back up. You can only see it if it's geometrically over the object, and not just being optically occluded relative to you, because like I said, the light rays are going to be scattered all throughout there. So if you add a medium here to provide a boundary layer to project an image on, well, those scattered light rays are going to form an image right there, and that's what happens. But when this object is geometrically below, when you add the butane, nothing. So yeah, it was an awesome year of going over their model from the very backbone of astronomy using true positions for navigation, and then telling everyone that that's only works because the Earth's a globe, and going into their refraction, terrestrial refraction in depth, and showing how if something is geometrically occluded, it's no longer visible anymore. Like that's their hypothesis of being lifted up over a curve isn't valid. There's no lab demonstrations of them ever showing a homogeneous gradient lifting an object over another object, let alone quantifying whether or not said object was geometrically occluded by the other object. Like there's so much that they take as for assumption because of their astronomical model, which happens to be useful for them for navigating, and because of that, they just everything has to, well, it has to be a globe, it has to be this much refraction, it has to be their astronomical refraction model is the same way. They compute, assuming the globe, they computate out integrals and integrate in real world observations, and then come up with the correction formula for what the amount of refraction would have to be to cause the separation from the true position moving at 15 degrees per hour from the angular position descending at a slower rate than what is predicted. And so it's nothing but mathematical models. That's what the whole globe is. And it was awesome to have that deconstructed. So when people are like, how does a flat earther explain the sun? Like, how does the globe model explain that the sun isn't getting geometrically occluded immediately for the observer when it's underneath a mountain or when it's underneath the curvature of Earth? Why do these stars not line up with your reported model, even at the time of occlusion? Like the occlusion happened at the end of the arc length, but not at the time predicted based on the descent rate. It's all conceptual. It's not a real model of reality. The sun we see in the sky has nothing to do with the Earth being a globe. So, although it does make a convincing model if you reference it within a coordinate system, but you have to bind it to that single observer for symmetry. So that's what it is, and that's what it always has been. Does anyone have any comments or things they want to share from the year?
Good presentation. Good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to.
The stars would appear
earlier this year that you mentioned something today that kind of made me think about it. You mentioned that these things can be, but don't necessarily represent reality. And earlier this year, I had a conversation with the dude from CERN. What's his name again?
Franco.
Franco, right. And it's funny because at that time he said, I don't care if somebody was pressing him about reality and physics or not reality. It works. And I was watching that woman who I like.
Your mic is cutting in and out. Like it sounds good at some points and then it's bad. Like, are you moving away and closer, or can you plug something in and plug it back?
Yeah.
There's something here that can be done. I know it.
Don't worry about it. I'm good. I'll let you guys know.
No, but I think where you were going with it though was mainstream physics has abandoned does my model conceptually like represent reality versus like does my calculation match it, right?
Or can we do something with the math that works? Doesn't have to represent reality. They don't care.
Right. Yeah, as long as it works. And that was Copernicus's original point. That the astronomers will use whatever tools or calculations necessary to make their equations work, whether or not they have physical meaning or not is only God could know. And if you enter astronomy thinking that you're going to, learn something about the physical reason why anything occurs in the sky, you're going to leave astronomy a bigger fool than when you entered it. That was what he told people when they were like, "Hey, why are you saying the Earth moves when the Bible says it doesn't?" He was like, "Look, guys, it's just a conceptual model."
Wow, people don't even really think about that.
Yeah, and then like, dude, like think about how funny our history, as told to us, is. It's like this guy who was like, "Guys, it's just a conceptual model. Like, don't burn me at the stake. It's just a teaching tool." And they were like, "Oh, okay, fine, fair enough." And then all of a sudden, they slowly started, "Oh, dude, it is in motion." Like they just started, uh, "Oh, the model is exactly what it is. No way." Hilarious.
That was all. That was my comment for the day, guys. Anybody else?
Yeah, your mic is improved 100% now though since I shamed it.
Nice.
Oh, now it's back to being not good. All right. Yo Stone, welcome sir. See
Hey,
you
guys.
see you
How
joined.
we doing?
I
Yeah.
just did the recap. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on or say before we wrap up here?
No, I just caught the very tail end of it, so I don't know what you did or didn't cover. It sounded. I'm guessing it was a slightly shorter version than on Sunday.
It was about 2 hours shorter.
Fantastic. That means our audience is still conscious. That's a plus right there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
dude.
man.
So yeah, if there's anything you want to add though, I just gave like the rundown of basically, the central theme of everything this year kind of turned out to be celestial, theodolite, and coordinate system related, and the stuff that you had shown how, the sun isn't following their predicted geometry for shadows, and the ILS experiment, and the Felix jump and all that.
Yeah, it's been quite the roller coaster this year, I must say. Holy moly. I don't think I would need to go into too much specifics. People who don't know what we're talking about when we mention these things should definitely go back and watch the streams. That is just the greatest resource that we have. Are the channels we keep, both mine on Rumble, yours on YouTube, and Shane's in so many places, including Twitter. Yeah, an excellent archive and annal of exactly what's been going down in the past year, which for me, because it was so busy, I mean, for me, 2025 just vaporized, to quote Jack Black. I don't know how it, I must be getting older because the time just keeps getting faster. But damn, it was true this year. Holy crap. There was just so much hustle and get ready and make it happen and so much execution. That this whole year just spun right by. I'd like to do it again. I think we could even improve slightly on what we did, but I guess that's what 2026 is for. So yeah, looking forward to a couple of cool things, even that have been on my back burner for 6 to 12 months that will finally come out in 2026. It looks like, and sauce it up a little more. Yeah, looking forward to it, I should say.
Nice. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. 2026 is going to be great. All right. Well, we can wrap it up for the year here. Thanks everyone for coming out. Thanks everyone for the support. Much
Oh, I
appreciated.
wanted to say something really quickly.
Oh yeah?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's up, Lily?
Sure can.
Well, I was just gonna say, this was a great presentation, and also that, wow, thank you so much, you guys, Stone G, Alan G, Shane G, and the rest of the crew, for giving us such amazing content all year. Like, I feel I've learned so much. And I mean, you guys do the slogging, because this is just one step at a time of debunking the whole globe theory. And you guys are doing an amazing job, just so honest and a lot of hard work. And, no, nothing's left untied. Everything is like you guys did a great job. And yeah. And of course, I wanted to do my brushtail coffee so that I don't get sued by you guys.
Ah. Yeah, go ahead and run the brushtail ad, Lily. Ladies and gentlemen, The Brushtail
Yeah.
Babe. Go ahead, Lily.
Yes, the Brushtail Babe. Oh yeah. So I was at this tropical beach, a little vacation from the cold, because I'm way up north in North America. And anyways, so I went to this beach, and then of course, I had my Brushtail coffee with me, and then I had my phone, and then I had, the little charger thing was plugged in to the phone, and I just had left the wire there just because it's all in one case or whatever. Anyway, long story short, so I accidentally spilled a little bit of Brushtail coffee on the sand, and I didn't know at the time, but I guess the part of the recharger that goes normally into the socket for power, for electricity, it fell right on that spot where the coffee and the sand was. And and then I just, I didn't know. And so then I went to my phone again about half hour later, because we were under this big beautiful magnolia tree and those palm trees and coconut trees. Anyways, long story short, and then I noticed that the phone had fully charged from being like at 20%. And I was like, oh my God, there's got to be something in the sand. So we took it to a lab, and we discovered that that particular sand, when it combines with Brushtail coffee, it makes electricity. So that's my latest adventure. If you ever need your phone charged, try it. Just kidding.
Are you telling me that you plugged your phone charger into a Brushtail coffee and it charged your phone?
Well, it had spilled onto this very special sand. That's what my suspicion is. Yeah.
Well, you heard it
'Cause
here
the lab-
first, people. If you dunk your phone in Brushtail coffee, it will stay charged not only longer, but faster.
Yeah, it just charged up super duper fast. Just from that plug sitting in that little spot where the coffee fell. Yep.
Nice. All right. Thank you, Lily. We will take that into consideration when we renegotiate for next year.
Yes, Happy New Year to everybody. Love all you guys. My lovely Flat Earth family. Have a wonderful, beautiful New Year's Eve and a great, great 2026.
Likewise. Hear ye, hear ye.
All right.
Much love, all.
All right. We will
Thank
be
you for coming
back.
and
Oh,
talking.
sorry. Go ahead.
That was it.